All right, it's a new episode of Foundation. Do we learn why the gods made wine? Well, yes, we do, and a whole lot more. Let's talk about Foundation Season 2, Episode 6. Oh wow, it is Friday, so that means another episode of Foundation, and what an episode this is. This is David Stark from Watcher Pass. We're talking about Foundation Season 2, Episode 6, Why the Gods Made Wine. So let's get right into it. Let's first start with a cheers, and let's find out why the gods made wine and so much more. This episode is premiering on Apple TV Plus on August 18th, 2023. I think I've said in my last couple reviews that I wish these episodes were a little longer. They tend to be about 45, 48 minutes long. This is a longer one. This is 58 minutes long, and it is a really good one. My hot take is, look, I think you should watch it. It starts fairly slowly. I didn't love it at the start, but wow, it has one of the most powerful emotional endings in the series. I love the way that this episode ended. I love the extra insight that you got, and it does end on a cliffhanger, which I didn't love as much, but that journey to get there was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And again, I'm excited to see where this series goes. If you haven't seen Foundation yet, you should definitely check it out. This is season 2. It's right in the middle. You should be able to catch up before the rest of the season. It's a 10-episode season, so we've got about 4 left. And you should definitely catch up because it is getting really, really good. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the episode, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and then go into a recap. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers in the recap section. If you don't want to know what happens in this episode, I would turn it off when I get there. Before that, I'll keep it vague. I'll keep it spoiler-free. I'll let you know when I get to those spoilers. So this episode continues from the big revelation we had last episode, where you found out that Gaal, Salvor, and Harry are stuck on Ignis with this kind of colony that they didn't know existed, this colony of like mentalists, of telepathic folks. They're called Mentalics. I don't love the name. There's a lot of weird naming around this group. Like when they told, when they were trying to make someone pass out and they said, unthink their minds. They're called the Mentalics, but you know what? It's fine. Whatever. We can go with it for now. So Harry, Gaal, and Salvor are stuck on Ignis with the Mentalics. And there's a little bit of intrigue going on because at the very end of the last episode, we found out that the kind of leader of the Mentalists, this person named Tellum, knows about the establishment of the second foundation and said that it's not going to happen here. She also wants to find the Prime Radiant and destroy it. So it seems like when Harry, Gaal, and Salvor crashed on this place and found this like great spot, there's going to be a little bit more sinister intrigue going on, which I love. I'm here for it. We also get some updates on the Empire and a very, very brief update with Hober Mallow. So let's get right into it. Things I liked about this episode. The first, I loved the ending. I thought the ending was fantastic. It really was emotional. It was dark. It was exciting. It gave some insight into a character that, you know, we've seen a lot, but we haven't really seen much of their emotional backstory. Well, now we get to see that. I really loved it. And it definitely added some layers to that character. And it was an unexpected kind of like emotional journey that just closed this episode out fantastically. The second thing I love, look, I love this new character we get introduced to named Yanna. She was a fun character. She was a fun foil to like the main people that she interacted with. She was kind of like a breath of fresh air, and it was really great to see her, learn more about her. And I thought she was a fun addition to this overall world. And the last thing I love, look, I love the intrigue. It's the last couple episodes have really ratcheted it up. We get some more plots, we get some more danger, and I really loved it. So that being said, things I didn't love as much about this episode. The first, I didn't love the slow start. Like, if you'll see, the things I love about this episode are all kind of towards the end. The start was relatively slow. It did kind of build towards that ending, but at the first like 10 or 15 minutes, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to really love this. Thankfully, it stuck the landing. This episode is really fantastic on the back end, but just know that it has a kind of a slow, like not as interesting, not as exciting start. And the second thing I didn't love as much, Hober Mallow, look, I love the character. I love whenever he's in there, but we got a very kind of brief glimpse at him this episode. There was a few little updates, like a little bit more on his story, but I almost think we didn't need it because he probably had what, like 3 minutes of screen time, 4 minutes of screen time. I feel like you could have just pushed that to the next episode where I assume we will get some more information. I guess they need to at least, you know, give us a taste so that next episode we can find out more about what actually happens to him. But it just felt weird when we would like break to see him and then you get a very, very brief update and then boom, back to the more interesting kind of fuller sections of the episode. So again, neither of those really spoiled my enjoyment of this episode. So definitely check this episode out and check out Foundation in general if you haven't started it. I'm going to go into a recap now. So if you don't want to know what happened in this episode, I would turn it off now because there will be spoilers. So there are kind of 3 main storylines and the Hober Mallow one. You've got the kind of the whole arc of Ignis, which is kind of the bulk of it. So I'll do that one last. You've got, and then you have some other kind of intrigue on Trantor. On Trantor, you have Brother Constant and Polyverisov who are coming to Trantor on a diplomatic mission. And then you also have Empire and Queen Sareth starting to kind of like make their union official, and some of the kind of friction that happens because of that. And then you also have this like strange, very quick Hober Mallow scene, which I'll just touch on that first. So remember, Hober Mallow got a special mission from Vault Harry in the Vault. It seemed like he was supposed to like go out and assassinate someone. He was supposed to do something essentially dirty. Like he was kind of like the one that was going to get his hands dirty for Harry and for the overall plan. He gets sent on these coordinates out into space. He gets there, he arrives there, and he's like, there's nothing here. And he's like, but the coordinates are right. Like the plan was there, but there's nothing here. And then after he arrives, a big ship like comes out of like hyperspace or whatever, and like arrives basically on top of him. Hober is captured and he gets into this ship, and inside is like this strange kind of like honeycomb structure around the ship. It looks very visually appealing, but there's not really a ton to figure out what's going on. He basically is exploring the ship. He sees this like mass of, he gets like, as he's exploring, he gets kind of pushed into the middle of this kind of like area. And when he gets in there, all these synthetic humans kind of like fly out from him, like when he gets there, all these synthetic humans kind of like fly out from where he goes. And then the main one, the one that we saw her earlier in this episode, this person named like She Bends Light. She's a kind of synthetic human. So she's human, but she has all these cybernetic kind of upgrades to her. Like she basically has no stomach, and you can see her like exposed metal ribs. She's an interesting looking character, but she is here also. And when she sees Hober, she turns to him and says, "Who are you and why have you defiled the home swarm?" And that's it. That's all the Hober Mallow stuff we get. Presumably we'll learn some more next episode, but that is Hober Mallow. And so now going to Trantor, we have Brother Constant and Polly Verisov, who are there on a diplomatic mission. And they have a little bit of friction when they get there. They don't really seem to have the right papers, so they get kind of held up in customs very briefly. They kind of like give them a temporary visa and say, "Hey, your application will be reviewed, and you'll hear from us in a couple days." So they're here. They want to kind of meet with the Emperor. They want to try to negotiate a truce with Empire. But look, they're here on the travel. They're basically on their company's dime, the church's dime. So they decide to have a nice night out. And so after their night out, Polly asks Constant to kind of like flush his drugs, which is nice. It's a nice change for his character. His character before seeing Harry in the Vault was kind of like a drunk. He was still kind of living on the laurels of being the person that had seen Harry before. Now, after he met Harry in the Vault, after he drank the wine from the Prophet's Cup, he seems to have turned over a new leaf. He wants to kind of like, I don't know, re-engage with his faith. He wants to kind of become clean. He wants to kind of like be the character that he is supposed to be. And then he also has this lovely speech with Brother Constant where he says, he has belief in Harry because he saw him. He was the last person alive that saw Harry before he went in the vault. And so he always knew who Harry was. He knew that the Harry was a physical thing, or at least a kind of a person. And he had belief that Harry would come back. Whereas Brother Constant her generation never saw Harry. They only kind of like had second and third hand accounts. They had faith. And he says that their faith is a beautiful thing because they, never had a physical meeting with the prophet, and yet they still believed in him. So Polly Verisov has this lovely speech where he's basically saying that like Brother Constant's faith is something very beautiful, very kind of moving. At the end of the speech, we hear someone say, "Congratulations, your visit on Trantor has been extended indefinitely." And we look up and you see Brother Constant kind of with this like metal mask over her face being restrained by some cops. And then you see the original customs person that kind of like checked them into Trantor. Here also, is the one that said this to Polly Verisov. And then a kind of metal hood gets put over Polly Verisov. He gets kind of restrained, and it seems like they are going to be tortured in a Empire prison for who knows how long. We'll find out, but that is their arc. Now, additionally on Trantor, we have some updates with Empire. So Brother Day is moving forward with his marriage to Queen Sareth, and he is in this like Colosseum, and he is unveiling a statue of the last empress before the genetic dynasty happened. Presumably, I think it's Cleon the First's mother. And then after that, they had the genetic dynasty. So there was no need for an empress because they just kind of like cloned their DNA going forward. Well, he's unveiling this statue of this empress to kind of announce that there will now be a new empress. And he introduces Queen Sareth and tells the crowd, like, basically, if it's not clear, I am ending the genetic dynasty. We are now going to have like a true dynasty, and Queen Sareth will be your empress. It's a nice speech. It's a powerful speech. And then what I love is that then Queen Sareth comes up and she gives like a very populist speech, like definitely not something that I think Brother Day was expecting or what Brother Day was planning. She gives a speech saying like, everyone out here, we are serving you. You are our like bosses, essentially. Like, come to us with your problems and we will fix them. It is not what the Empire has generally put forth, and it sounds like maybe there will be an interesting dynamic between Queen Sareth and Brother Day. And then, in a further kind of like power play, Brother Day kind of like holds out his hand for her to grab at the very end of her speech, and she kind of lingers for a little bit. She doesn't take it immediately. She looks at him for a little bit and then takes his hand. So it's this very kind of subtle power dynamic that I really like seeing. It seems like Queen Sareth and Brother Day are going to have some interesting friction. And now that he's announced that she is going to be the Empress, he really can't make her disappear. So we will see what happens. But definitely you can tell that Demerzel is going to be involved in this, because Brother Day also looks at Demerzel before he and Queen Sareth go off into, I guess, their chambers. So now on Ignis, where we get the bulk of this episode. We get a lot from Ignis. You have Salvor and Harry. They are having trouble sleeping. And it seems like because of all the mentalics around them, because of all the kind of like mental energies, they are experiencing other people's dreams. And Harry also thinks that they are kind of assaulting his mind, that the mentalics are trying to like pick at his mind to kind of get information, which is probably true. That seems like there's definitely kind of a push and pull going on here. So after this, Salvor kind of like goes for a walk along the beach, and there she meets this young boy who like talks to Salvor about this like the Mentalics colony, what they've done, and he basically says that like Tellum saved him, and you see that there's like a scar on his neck, and then the boy uses his powers to like show Salvor what happened. And it seems like the boy and his family were killed because they were able to kind of like do things that other people couldn't, and everyone else was scared of that, so they slit his parents' throats, and then they slit his throat. And after they slit his throat, he fell down and looked up, and he saw Tellum there. Tellum apparently came to him, and she apparently healed him, which I thought that all of her powers were mental. Maybe there is some sort of physical manifestation as well, because she was able to kind of heal his neck and make sure he didn't die. It seems like a pretty big power that I didn't realize that Tellum had. So after this, the boy like takes Salvor to kind of the middle of this village and says that like she wants to understand everyone's plight. And so everyone kind of like reaches out to her, kind of like a savior kind of thing, where everyone is kind of like reaching out, and they all touch Salvor. And when this happens, she gets all of their like mental pain, like all of their journey here. She gets that. So she experiences it all at once, which could be upsetting. It was, but it also was kind of like uplifting, because she saw like their pain, their anguish, and then like what they were able to get when they came to Ignis. So we get a lot from Tellum here. Tellum is trying to pick at the various members of Harry, Salvor, and Gaal. And one of the things that happens is she is talking to Harry, and Harry mentions that Gaal was able to see the future. And Tellum doesn't believe this. Like Tellum says, like, that is not a possible, like that is an impossible power. Like she knows Mentalics, she knows what kind of powers they have, and being able to see the future is not something that she has ever experienced. So after she talks to Harry, and Harry stresses that like he needs a second foundation to prevent like what happens in the future, where another Mentalic, this person named the Mule, comes to power and like does terrible, terrible things. Now Tellum again doesn't believe that someone can see the future, but she goes to Gaal and uses her powers to kind of see what Gaal saw, and experiences that power and realizes that Gaal actually could see the future. But Tellum doesn't think that this is like a set in stone future. She thinks that this is a possible future, and she is trying to convince Gaal to kind of break with Harry and do her own thing to try to make sure that this vision doesn't come to fruition. She says like what Harry said is not set in stone, and you could change it. So she is trying to drive a wedge between Harry and Gaal and try to get Gaal to kind of like come to her side. And what is her like trump card? What is her reason for this? Well, she says that if you kind of like, let me help you, let me train you, let me show you your powers, you can prevent this future from happening. And that means that Salvor won't die. Because remember, in the vision that Gaal saw, one of the first things she saw was Salvor dead on the street. And so Tellum is using the fact that Gaal saw Salvor to try to push her into her camp and away from Harry. When Tellum was trying to convince Gaal, she basically said like, you need to make your own choices. And this kind of upset Gaal, because Gaal's been following Harry for a very long time. Now, after the fact, Tellum comes to visit Gaal and like apologize, but it's never really an apology. Tellum seems to always be kind of like working an angle. And so when she gets there, she like throws water in Gaal's face, and like Gaal's instantly transported back to her home planet. And Tellum sees this, like Tellum is in her head seeing this. And she kind of orchestrated this. She threw water in Gaal's face. She had a barnacle in her pocket, which is a kind of like a fun like spell. Like you put a barnacle in your pocket, you throw water, and boom, you're transported. But she used that to connect Gaal's mind to like her past. And so when this happened, Gaal's mind was drawn back to her past, and that's how Tellum was able to go in there and see it. And it feels like during this whole kind of interaction, Tellum might be like just in her head. Tellum might not actually be there, even though she physically threw water, which would be kind of a weird mental power to do. She keeps jumping around the room. So like she will go from one spot to another. And it's not clear, but it seems like Tellum is maybe like projecting herself into Gaal's head. And during this, Gaal and Tellum starts to try to like unlock Gaal's powers. And so they have like a mental psychic battle. Gaal uses her own powers to like mentally push Tellum like across the room. So again, I don't know if this is like Gaal getting like telekinesis, or if it's Gaal like unlocking her own mental powers and being able to push the projection to Tellum around and like fight back. I think it's more the latter. I don't think Gaal is going to have like telekinesis powers, but maybe, who knows? She can see the future. Who knows what else she can get? But she is now able to kind of like push Tellum away and kind of fight back with Tellum, who is a very, very powerful mentalic. So it seems like Gaal has her own innate abilities and that she is going to also be very powerful. Now, this whole thing was kind of Tellum trying to test Gaal, because basically she then says, like, she's not well and she's looking for a successor. And she thinks that Gaal could be that successor. She wants Gaal to be the one that leads her people going forward. Now, there's always a catch here. There's always a catch with Tellum. And in this instance, the catch is, well, if Gale's leading the Mentalics, they'll only follow one of their own. So they'll only follow Gaal. That means that Harry, who is not a Mentalic, he is just a brilliant mathematician, but he doesn't have like the mental powers that Salvor and Gaal have. Harry would have to go. Harry could not be here. And then again, this is interesting. Like, Tellum is trying to drive a wedge in. So she's offering Gaal this like avenue forward. Like she could lead the Mentalics. She could unlock her powers. She could change the future, but that means that Harry has to go away. So now we get a scene with Harry and Salvor. They're kind of talking about, they're talking about the vault and they're talking about the Prime Radiant. And it turns out that the Harry in the vault was like programmed by Harry Seldon. He like programmed a copy of him, an image of him, but didn't give it all the information that Harry has. So he gave it a subset so that it could fulfill its role as like the Harry in the vault, but didn't have Harry's full experience, didn't have Harry's full thoughts. And Salvor was like, look, if you made it as smart as you and gave it some information, don't you think that Harry could figure out the rest of you, like the rest of the stuff that it would need? Don't you think that Harry could come up with its own plans? And this is an interesting thought because it kind of seeds the idea that maybe the Harry in the vault is going to be its own nemesis going forward. We also find out about the Prime Radiant and the vault and the way that they are connected. And Harry basically says like the Prime Radiant and the vault are like, they're connected, and it's one device that exists in two spots. And he says it's like a quantum device, so it can like exist in two places and be connected into one object. Not really how quantum works, I don't think, but for this purpose, it's fine. Basically, you can think of like the Prime Radiant and the vault as being connected to a single device and kind of being able to interact and communicate with each other across space and probably across time as well. So after this, Gaal and Tellum appear, and Gaal basically tells Harry about the proposition that Tellum made. Basically, that Gaal would become the leader of the Mentalics, and that means Harry has to go. And Tellum then starts asking Harry about something that happened when he was younger. She like brings up this information about Harry's youth that Harry clearly doesn't want to talk about. Like, he is thrown off by this. And when she brings this up, Harry like flees quickly. He like runs away. He says like, "You're in my thoughts. How can I trust my own thoughts?" Like, he is very disturbed by all this. So Salvor then eventually tracks Harry down and, recognizes that what Tellum said like really got to him. And Harry says that like he couldn't shake this memory that he had from when he was a kid, and that Tellum was like in his mind. She was like assaulting his mind, trying to get in there. And he says that Tellum is after the Prime Radiant, and Harry doesn't know where it is. When the Mentalics attacked the ship, Harry told Gaal to hide the Prime Radiant and not tell him where it was. And so Harry has no idea where the Prime Radiant is. So Tellum seems to be assaulting his mind to try to get that location, but he doesn't know. After this, Salvor goes and talks to Gaal. Salvor seems to be kind of the go-between between Harry and Gaal at this point. She's talking to Gaal, and Gaal does something sweet for Salvor. She gives her a birthday present. And Gaal didn't actually really even know that it was Salvor's birthday. Tellum told her that it was Salvor's birthday earlier in their conversation. But Gaal gives Salvor a birthday present. It's a piece of fruit. It's the only thing that she could like salvage. But it is sweet that she is starting to kind of like take on that motherly role to Salvor, even though they're basically the same age and essentially sisters. Now, while they're talking, they see their ship like lift off and fly away, and they look and see Harry is flying the ship, and they're like, oh my, like, and you think like, oh my gosh, like Harry was so disturbed by everything here. He kind of is heeding Gaal's thoughts and like leaving Ignis for good. It seems crazy, it seems very sudden, but that happened. But then we see that actually wasn't Harry. Harry is actually captured by Tellum, and he's being held in like a water prison, a prison where he is like chained up, and a wave is slowly crashing up and like slowly filling this pit that he's in. Eventually the wave will like overtake him and he will not be able to breathe. But he is fighting to he is trying to stay up, he's trying to stay afloat. Will he be able to? Well, we don't know, but we do then get this really great sequence. This is the ending that I loved. I love the sequence. We see Harry as a little boy. He was a farmer. His family was like farming these things called moon scoots, I think they were called. And they're these like hybrid like dragon horses that will run towards the moon. At one point in this planet, the moon gets close enough that if these moon scoots get a running start, jump off and fly, they're able to fly up and get to the moon and graze on the moon. So it's this interesting like creature, and Harry is watching them and like working out a pattern. And after he works out this pattern, he walks in the middle of these moon scoots as they're like stampeding down, and he's like, and he has the pattern in his head, so he knows where they're going to go. So he walks in the middle and knows that he's safe. Now, his mother doesn't realize this, and she sees her little boy in the middle of all these moon scoots, and like after they go, she like runs out and grabs him and is super worried. And Harry's like, no, I was safe. Like, I figured out the pattern. Like, can't you see it? Didn't you see it? So you get this feeling that Harry like is brilliant from a young age, and he sees things that other people don't. And his mom clearly doesn't understand it. She's worried. His dad also doesn't understand it, and he comes up to him and just smacks Harry. And then we skip to Harry at university. He's talking to someone, the like provost of the university, about this latest paper that he wrote. And it's a paper about how like essentially all empires fall. But Empire, the big empire, doesn't like this paper at all. They seem to take offense to it. And Harry's like, no, I was just stating a constant. Like all empires rise, all empires fall. But Empire doesn't like this. So during this conversation, this new character shows up, this Dr. Yanna, who comes up to the provost and is like, hey, like, I'm Dr. Yanna. I'm here. I was a teacher of probabilistic analysis and data visualization. I'm here a day early. I need an office. Do you have an office? And the provost is like, we don't, well, you're supposed to show up tomorrow. Like, we don't have anything ready. And it's like, it's okay. I can just share an office here. This office is fine. She goes into Harry's office and you're like, oh, this will be fun. It'll be like an odd couple. Like, Harry is this like mathematical genius who doesn't like people. And Dr. Kyne seems like this bubbly, nice person and Dr. Kyne seems like this lovely, radiant person that loves everyone. So after Harry and Yanna are in the office, it seems like Yanna knows more about Harry than she kind of originally let on. She knows his work, she knows his theories, and it seems like they're going to do wonderful things together because she is a doctor of like data visualization and analysis, and Harry is a doctor of psychohistory. So it seems like together maybe they can do great work. And it seems like Yanna maybe knew this and kind of orchestrated this whole thing because she definitely knows Harry's work. She definitely knows like she can do great things with him. And so they start talking shop, and then eventually Harry asks her out. Now, it all seems lovely, but remember, Harry wrote this article that the Empire didn't like, and it seems like Empire is starting to take an interest in Harry's work. And Harry later sees the provost talking to some shadowy character in this big hat. You get the impression this is someone from the Empire, someone that is going to do horrible things. And Harry should be scared, but he is not. He's still in this, I guess, university bubble. He still thinks that nothing can happen to him. Later, we see Harry show Yanna a prototype of the prime reading. It is a rough prototype. It is not the beautiful kind of like gold and glass box that the prime reading is now, but it does the things that Harry wants it to do. It like you can turn it over and it shows the plan. It like shows the visualization of his theory, of his data, which is what the like perfect merger of their two fields were. So after Harry shows Yanna this prototype, she has something for him, and she gives him this necklace. And you can't really tell what this necklace is. It has like a diamond shape and two like jewels on it, and one of them is blinking very fast. And she doesn't explain what it is. Harry gets it, and he kind of realizes what this is, and you get the impression that this means that Yanna is pregnant. So she is giving him, I don't know, maybe like an engagement ring-ish thing, but it tells Harry that Yanna is pregnant. So after this very joyous scene, the provost gives Harry essentially an offer that he can't refuse. He says that the Empire wants him to come teach at a university in Trantor. And the provost says like they want Harry to continue his work, but they want Harry to be closer so that Empire can review his work and like kind of give him pointers on it. And Harry's like, absolutely not. Like, they are going to stuff my research. I'm not going to go right into the belly of the beast. That is going to be like detrimental to my work, and I need to stay out here where I can be free to kind of do my work. Now, Yanna tries to convince him to do this. And this is where we get the line that gives this episode its title. Yanna is talking to him, trying to convince Harry to kind of go take the Empire up on this offer. And she basically drops the line that the gods made wine to compensate those who cannot afford revenge. And it's this line from this philosopher that she likes. But she is trying to convince Harry to go to Trantor to take this up, and Harry says no, like it would suffocate him, he can't do it. Later, the provost shows up at the doorstep when Harry's not around and tells Yanna that she has to come with him. And oh yeah, now the provost has a gun. And so basically it was an offer that they couldn't refuse, and now that Harry's refused it, Yanna is in trouble. We see Harry later walking through the city, and that shadowy figure that we saw earlier with the big hat is following him. Harry comes back to his apartment and Yanna's not there. But when he gets into the apartment and sees that she's not there, he feels some pain in his chest and he grabs that necklace that Yanna gave him earlier. And they don't say what this means, but you get the impression this means that Yanna is probably dead. Like this was connected. Like Yanna had a necklace like this, Harry had a necklace like this. It seems like when Harry was grasping his chest, he was feeling something that was happening to Yanna. Now, later, the provost shows up in front of Harry with a car, and she tells Harry to get in, that she's going to take Harry to Yanna. And she basically tries to say, like, oh, no, we kidnapped Yanna to make sure that you would take up this offer. But if Harry agrees that this car will take him to Yanna and they'll be reunited. Now, Harry knows that something is up. Now, the provost wanted Harry to just take this car by himself. He takes the provost with him and kind of hijacks this whole mission. He takes the car somewhere else. And while the provost is in the car with him, Harry's like, Yanna's already dead. She's like, no, like she is just being held. Like they wouldn't kill her. And he's like, Yanna's dead and our child has drawn its last breath. So Harry takes his car out to the desert and the provost is still trying to convince Harry like, oh, no, Yanna's alive. Like she's just being held. And Harry's like, no, he felt her die. And he tells the provost that Yanna didn't believe in marriage and she gave him this necklace so that Harry could feel her heartbeat and the baby's heartbeat against his chest all the time. A very sweet, very beautiful necklace. But that also means that Harry felt when both of their heartbeats stopped, which was shortly after the provost gave him the ultimatum. The provost pulls the gun out and says, give me the prime radiant, all this will stop. Harry's like, I hacked your gun already. It's not going to work. He touches the gun and walks away. The provost pulls the trigger, nothing happens. Harry seems to have his whole revenge kind of planned out here. So now the provost realizes that her game is up and she doesn't have her gun. So she starts pleading with Harry. She says, Harry, she wasn't supposed to die. And Harry, in a very cool Harry way, is like, you're lying. I saw the pulse jump in your neck. Stop lying. And then he releases these drones into the air. And what is going on here? What is happening? And the provost asks, what are those? And he calls them sheepdogs. And that's when we hear some animals coming. And the provost looks up and she says, those are moonstrikes. And which are the animals that we saw earlier. Those animals that are horse dragon things that go and graze on the moon. Well, Harry used those drones to call them towards Harry and the provost. And the provost realizes that she is in danger. So she's like, Harry, revenge is in your nature. And Harry's like, no, it's in yours, but this is for her. Now, remember, Harry at a young age had figured out the kind of pattern that these moon strikes take. And so he grabs the provost, stands in the middle of them. And as the moon strikes come towards them, Harry kind of stands where he knows he'll be safe and throws the provost to the side. So she gets trampled by these moon strikes as Harry just kind of moves in the pattern that will keep him safe. So after this, after Harry has lost everything, he takes the Empire up on its offer and goes to Streeling, which is this university he's going to teach at. And when he gets there, this nice library page shows him the library and says the library on Streeling is one of the most extensive in the Empire. We have all the books you request. And he hands him a book by Gork Tarka. And he says, this is a weird request for a mathematician. And we realize that this is the philosopher that Yanna suggested to Harry. This is a philosopher where the why the gods made wine line comes up. And it's interesting because look, the gods made wine for people that couldn't afford revenge. Harry got his revenge, although it still feels empty because he got his revenge for killing his beloved and their child. So he got his revenge. He was able to do it. But it still feels kind of empty for him. But now he has that philosopher. I think he's going to read up a little bit more and also try to remember Yanna. That is kind of the end of Harry's backstory, this lovely, dark revenge story that I did not expect to have. And then we're transported to Ignis, where Harry is trying to stay afloat. The water is rising. He eventually goes under, and he thinks of Yanna. He thinks of all the happy memories. And that's when the camera pans back, and we see Harry under the water. His eyes are open. It looks like he is drowned. The camera flies up, and we see Harry under the water. And that's it. That's the end of this episode. Is Harry dead? Did he come back for like 2 episodes only to be killed briefly? I don't think so. It feels like that would be like a waste of bringing Harry back to life, but maybe it was there to just make a point, give us some backstory, and then kill him. I think if I had to guess, Gale's like rapidly improving Mentalix powers. She's going to maybe be notified of Harry. She's going to feel his distress, and she's going to come and save him, and that'll maybe force a confrontation between Gaal and tell him, I don't know, maybe Harry's dead, and Gaal will have to find this out on her own. We will see, but that is the end of Foundation Season 2, Episode 6, Why the Gods Made Wine. It comes to Apple TV Plus on August 18, 2023. Definitely check it out if you haven't gone on the Foundation train. Get on it now because it is getting very, very good, and I'm excited to see where these last 4 episodes go. So thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.